Hi everyone, how are you all? I hope you're having a great start to the week. My name is Susie Edwards, and I'm delighted to be with you to run our webinar on time management. For those of you who haven't been to a session yet, I just wanted to run through a few things about how it works. So the session itself should run approximately 45 minutes in length. The way that the webinars are constructed is that as I go through the session, the presentation will move through with me. You will find that there are some key points where there's some interaction required. So I'll let you know when that happens, but what you'll see on the screen is that there will be an icon with a hands up. And when that happens, it means that I'm launching a poll. So when I launch the poll, you'll see that happen, and then you'll then be able to respond to it. I can then share that, and then we can then use it together as a group. So there's that element that takes place. The other thing that's available as well, and please do feel free to ask a question at any stage, is there is a function in your box around questions where you can ask questions. Depending on what the question is, I may well be able to bring that straight into the session, but if not, for any reason, I can then put together an FAQ to send through or to send appropriate links elsewhere. So what I would like to sort of cover today takes through a range of topic areas. So thank you. I have my first thing. Good afternoon as well. Lovely to hear from you. People are already popping in some hellos. That's marvellous. It's great to have you here. What I was hoping that we'd look at in terms of time management, and because of the format being a webinar, that we really look at a particular aspect and focus on self. And the reason for that is that it's one of the things that we can really control. We can own that, and we can start to think differently about how we use time, and in particular reference to ourselves. We can understand a little bit more about habits and behaviours that we've got into, which are both good and things that we need to change and alter. And as we go through the session, there will be some tools and techniques that I'll share that some of you will think that's brilliant, I want to try that out straight away, and others will think actually I would want to tweak that slightly, but either way, you'll find that it will be something that you can embed into your practice. One of the things that's really helpful for me to know is who is actually with us today. So one of the things that I'll do is I'll bring up one of the first polls. So what you'll see that I'm doing here is just launching it now. So what you'll see in front of you is that it will say polls open, and then it just asks you to identify with what group you're based in. So hopefully there will be a real nice mix within the room. I can then see how many people have voted, so almost everyone's there. Thanks everyone, you're almost, yeah, perfect. I've got it. So that's great. So what I can do now is that I can then just close that and share it with you so that you can all see what's going on. And it also just helps you to kind of also see within your peers who's there. So you can see that for the majority of people who are here today, it's SAS consultant and GP, and then we've got just over a fifth are junior doctors. So warm welcome to you all. But it's just, so one of the things that if you have thoughts and ideas that you want to share, I ask the questions and I can bring them in. If there's particular things that relate to your branch of practice, don't hesitate to do that as well. So that's great that we've got this now. One of the things that I thought I'd do is I'm just going to, so you'll just see that still on the screen, it just asks who's with us today. But what I want to just do is to read a very short extract from a typical day of two very different doctors. One is Dr. Holden and the other one is Dr. Kumar. So I'll go with Dr. Kumar first and just read a short extract of it and then move on to Dr. Holden. So Dr. Kumar is a dedicated doctor. He prides himself on his excellent relationships with patients, and they are most important to him. He cares deeply about their ongoing treatment and always spends as much time as he can with each one. His days are usually unstructured, and Dr. Kumar tends to work more with a laissez-faire style, becoming uncomfortable when anyone else tries to plan diary movements for them. His clinics often overrun, and he explains to other staff that it's so important for his patients to be happy than to everyone else to have a set time frame. His desk is often covered in paper, and it's quite evident to others that sometimes he has difficulty finding material. And when he does get around to dealing with paperwork, he doesn't necessarily have a complete system of processing everything, but he can find what he needs eventually. He also has an open door policy, which does mean that at times when he's due to come to meetings, he's often late because he's already engaged in a conversation with someone else about something that's very important, but actually it does mean that he's often not attending what he needs to. Increasingly, he's noticed that he's getting more and more exhausted, and he's actually been suffering from some headaches. He's been resorting to having some black coffee for strength, particularly before he's tackling his extra admin. But when he's returning home later and later at the moment. And then often when he's getting there, he's just exhausted and just wanting to completely recharge and retreat. That's Dr. Kumar. Now we have Dr. Holden. So Dr. Holden is a committed senior doctor. In addition to clinical duties, she has a number of non-clinical responsibilities that she schedules into her diary each week. The perception to her colleagues is that she's really well organised, and she tends to come across as being calm under pressure. She plans her week and regularly reviews her diary each morning if she can, so that she's got the first 30 minutes of the day where she's able to read and respond to email, and has an opportunity to do that within a set time. She'll then do that throughout the course of her day at certain periods of time. She then decides to get on with whatever activity she has planned during her non-clinic time, and she manages a team of people to do this, and she also holds brief but regular meetings with each person. She has developed systems and routines for her working day built around her clinical commitments. She has actually opted to keep her office door closed when she wants to make important phone calls or concentrate on getting specific jobs done. And everyone does understand that when the door is closed, she is engaged in a piece of work, but she then also has set times where she has an open door policy. Dr. Holden has a reputation of coping with the pressures and stress of the environment, and doesn't seem to lose her temper. She isn't necessarily late for meetings unless there has been a particular key critical reason for this. Now, what you'll find within both of those, and they're both fictitious typical days, but one of the things that I just wanted to sort of mention is that perhaps as I'm saying it, you may well recognise aspects of this in yourself, other people that you know, but what I'm trying to get at with just sort of putting it out there is that no matter what someone does, at the heart of what you're trying to do in terms of your work is to be as supportive as you can to your patients, to improve safety and care throughout, but you also want to try and do that in the most time efficient way that you can. And I think that one of the things that's really hard to do is that because you're so busy doing the day-to-day, it's hard to kind of take that time to just step off, I suppose, your own kind of conveyor belts and just reflect and think about what you actually do with time. And one of the things that I think is important is to try and think about, well, actually, I have got a set number of hours in the whole working week. And what would happen if I actually had an extra hour in the day? What would I want to use that extra hour for? And I do want us to think about this. And I've brought something up on the screen. It's just going to come up now to just get us to think about this. But I've set this up as a poll so that we can kind of look at it in a particular way. But equally, please don't hesitate to type in your own thoughts that if you had an extra hour in the week, what would you use it for? I'm going to launch a poll for you to have a look at this. And this is really helpful for me because one of the things that could be good to try and do is to think after today, how can I actually start to gain this in my own working practice? So I'm just going to launch this now. So it's called, if you had an extra hour in the week, what would you use it for? I'm just going to launch it. So it's got a couple of options on here. It's not exhaustive. So it's got sleep, exercise, learning, socializing, and family. So what you'll see here is there's a mix of things in here. And I actually did this in a face-to-face session recently, and we had a really interesting discussion from a range of doctors actually, and the mix, interestingly, was exactly you. There was a mix of junior doctors, GP, SAS, and consultant. And one of the things that came out of it was that is this idea of being just about brain care, of being able to have time to do something that's completely outside of work but will benefit well-being. And that may well simply be the fact that we want to exercise more, but fundamentally what was coming back a lot in the discussion was that opportunity to be with family and to have that opportunity to do that. So I'm just going to show you what's come through in the poll and just share that with you all now. And you know, I'd be expecting it to be right across the board, but interestingly, we've got quite a good mix between family and exercise, and then sleep, which you know, a fifth of you have come with, and then a mix between the rest. And the reason I want us to do that is that if we're thinking about self today, it's just thinking, well, how can I try and create that opportunity for that time with the family? Because as we all know, there isn't 25 hours in the day. And so even the best time management techniques are not going to give us 25 hours. But what we really need to try and do is we need to try and think differently about time and about our behavior in relation to time as well. And that's actually really the crux of what I want to have a look at. So what I'm just going to do now is I'm just going to bring up on the screen now, so you'll just see here the actual poll. Can you see that? And now I'm just hiding it now. That's great. So you should all see now on the screen. Great. This here, which just has the quote of even the best time management techniques. So we all can see that there together. There we go. The final thing that I want us to do, and then now I'll then have all I need, and then I'm going to do quite a lot of the discussion from here, is that there are a number of things that we tend to have happening with us that actually leads to challenges of things that we have that we are, if we were to ask ourselves, we think, actually, I could do this a bit better. I want to think about that. So one of the last things that I'd like us to do together, and thank you so much for doing it all, is that I now know everyone roughly where you're from, a little bit more about what you would love to have. And then this one is just like in terms of your own individual challenge that you're facing. I just want to just launch this now. So this has, again, I've put together some thoughts on this. If you have other things that you want to add in, please type it in and do it. But I'm just launching the last one now. So it's looking at, you know, what are those challenges in terms of what you've got. So it's got a mix of the actual volume or quantity of work that you've got. It's then got the fact that you may dedicate your time to coming in early. There we go. Just seeing if it's opening here. It doesn't want me to open it for you. Let me just see here. The poll doesn't quite want to work for me at the moment. So what I'll just do is, if it's all right with you all, I'll close it. There we go. And what I'll just do is I'll talk to you about it. And if you're able to kind of question in, that would be great. So on this one, what I wanted to just know about was the particular challenges that you're facing. So one of the things could be that there are issues around the quantity of the workload. There's also particular challenges in terms of interruptions. You have other things that are taking place there. Let me just see if I can try it one more time. If it doesn't work, then we'll leave it be. So it's looking at the idea of quantity of work, interruptions from other people, that feeling that you can't say no, finding it hard to delegate to other people because in a way sometimes it can be easier if you just do it yourself, and then finally that ability to balance your work and your time commitments together. So these are the few thoughts that I had around that. So if we go through it, if you're happy to kind of share some thoughts around that. Vijay, the poll has vanished. Yes, what I'm trying to say is the poll itself wouldn't let me, it came up and went down, so it won't let me launch it back. So if you're able to write in any thoughts on questions around the time management challenge you face, so particularly thinking about your own individual ones, so is it workload, being interrupted, that ability to say no or not, I'm struggling with it, perhaps delegating or balancing the work commitments with your own time. So thank you very much. I'm starting to see things coming through. So quite a few people are saying actually it's basically those barriers between work and trying to, the volume, the interruptions from other people, trying to get together that balance between the clinical commitments and the non-clinical work, not getting a chance to really get to the end of your clinical workload because of the demands. These will be things that other people will echo all the time. I'm also seeing quantity of work. I'm getting that work-life balance. This is, thank you so much, and that commitment to try and get the two together. Others, it's the workload itself. It's just this continual pressure of a mounting load of work to try and do. And then other people are just saying it's so multifaceted, it's a little bit of everything, of course. Other people are saying for you, sometimes it's actually, this is a really important one, that one of your colleagues has said here, this idea of being brought into emails that you don't need to be included into. And this is something that is become more and more of an occurrence, really, is that you have a culture where people are included into things, but actually there's not a need for it. And it sort of creates an email bottleneck where people are feeling obligated to actually respond to something that is nothing that they need to be a part of. There is a technique for looking at how to manage emails, and if anyone's interested in that, I can send something at the end of it. But thank you all so much. So this idea of the shift pattern as well. So for some people, their time feeling like it's absolutely ring-fenced. So that does mean that if there's anything else that people want to do, then it's encroaching onto personal time. Thank you all so much for doing that. It's so helpful. One of the things that I was thinking about in relation to this is that there are a few things that we tend to do which are extremely healthy that we must continue to do, but there are also some things that actually there could be a question on, really, are there other things that are getting in our way? So one of the things that you can see up on the screen at the moment, there's a few visuals on here, there's a cup of tea. Now, depending on the specialty that you're in, actually, the opportunity to have a habit where you can have a cup of tea or coffee is crucial. And so sometimes what can happen is that the habit that we form there is fundamental to our ability to be able to reflect, to share practice thoughts, but we need that habit of being able to have a chance to chat with other people. But one of the things that we tend to do is, because we are creatures of habit, that we often start the day in a particular way. So how many of you, question, how many of you actually have your mobile phone as an alarm and actually look at it within the first 15 minutes of waking up? So we'll just have that going through. So it's just a question to respond to how many of you actually find that you're doing that. And people are interested in the email managed technique. I'll definitely send that through, of course. So I've got a few people, no, good. Then I've got some people saying yes. Do you know what? It's one of the hardest things because of one of the great things about technology, and there's some fantastic app technology that we can use that really helps us with time management, which I'll talk about towards at the end. But one of the downsides of technology is that we kind of are completely connected, and our mindset and behavior around technology and around that connection, my personal view is that it can become very unhealthy. And there's a lot of research that relates to that to back up in terms of well-being. But in terms of those moments of how we start the day, in terms of how we ring fence time, by starting it off in a particular way, such as kind of looking, checking, we're already on the go. We've already increased our levels, our heart rate's already gone up before we've even started the day. And so one of the kind of key takeaways that I just get you to sort of think about to do, and it's very easy for me to say, is that most people nowadays don't have an alarm clock by their bed because they use their phone. But actually having something that is not their phone to wake them up in the morning if they need it just relieves the pressure of having the phone in the room. And that habit of just simply breaking that means that when we start the day, like some people are just saying they don't have it, then it just means that we kind of can just try and break that cycle ever so slightly, because starting the day off within a different state of mind, which isn't like I've got to check this straight away. You can even see my body, we're on the go. So one of the things that tends to happen with that is that our habits that we have some really healthy, crucial ones around being around it, even being around the tea trolley, depending on what your work is, having that chat with someone. But then we've got some unhealthy, creeping ones that are those ones where we actually are doing that to begin with. The other thing that we can sometimes have that's a problem is I put here this to-do list. Now, one of the things that a lot of people say to me is, I need to get better at writing my lists. Well, for some people, having lists actually is great to know that there's a lot of stuff that needs to be done. And this is a lot more about our, some people are saying some really important things about their phone now, which I completely understand. So just to finish that off, some people need to be contactable by their phone. Obviously, if you're on call and you need to be available, then always you've got to have your phone. I completely get that, and of course there'll be instances where you need that. But I think that if there's just that one. It's a very hard thing to break, to have the technology away from us. But honestly, even just coming down, and if it is that you're then going to come down and then check on the news to see what's happened, but you've just given yourself a few minutes where you've not absorbed in anything else except for yourself. One of the things about lists is it's very, very difficult to get more than a few things done in set periods of time. You know that yourself, because of the amount of work that's going on, clinical versus non-clinical. So I think sometimes what can also happen is that we've got these lists, but depending on our personality and style, you'll know some people that are very structured in their approach and are people who just get on and do things. But there are other people in the world who will procrastinate something. Now, that doesn't mean that they don't want to do it. It's just that actually for them, in terms of actually getting something done, they need to have the pressure of the deadline to actually get it done. So one of the things that can happen is that with the to-do list and doing all of that, we can see it, but it can actually create some anxiety and pressure for other people. One of the other things that I think is really very difficult to try and do is on the bottom here, we've got this idea of other people. Now, some of you will do, I'm absolutely sure of this, but again, please tell me if it's not the case, but some of you will actively get up early because you want to have some free space at work. And depending on whether you're in an open plan, whether you have a door or not, like Dr. Kumar and Dr. Holden, depending on what you have, you've come in early, but you've come there to do a particular job. And I suppose one of the things that struck me with Dr. Holden is that within that example really was the idea that the person was there, but she had set times when she was available for someone to interrupt. And I know that that's not ideal because you need to be on hand all the time, but having a system where you and the team that you work with all agree on what you're going to do, so the norms and behaviors of time changes. Because if you're actively getting in at 7 or 8 in the morning because you need to do something before handover, then you want to have that space. And if you have got a chance to do it, you don't necessarily want a knock at the door or someone waving that they can see you with like, it'll only take a second if you can just sign that for me, and that kind of thing. So there's something about the other people that we have there. We have to accept that we have some responsibility ourselves to think differently about that, about what we can try and do to help ourselves around that. And then the other part of other people is exactly what other people have mentioned, is this idea of being able to say no, and actually how do we say no without it coming across the wrong way. And then the other one of actually it might be easier if I just do it myself. So there's a few things sort of happening here, which is really important for us to look at. So I think that we've got the duties and responsibilities and demands of your attention. You've got your clinical work, you've got your direct patient pace and time, you've got your admin, your support work. You've got other responsibilities, teaching, supervision, personal development, meetings, cover, but sometimes what we find is that you've got so much going on here, we need to ring fence some time to ourselves. And I just want to start to, as we go through, share some other techniques around this and start to think about ourselves a bit more around that. And thank you all so much. I'm weaving in all the comments that people bring in just to share them as we go, but don't hesitate to ask anything as we go each time. And if there's any thoughts that you've got that you want to bring up, I'll bring them in if I can. Now, there are certain things which are called drivers of time, and some of you will find that as I start to explain this, you absolutely find that there's, you know, more than one. You're a bit of all of them, but you might find that actually there's one in particular that is more dominant for you. The other thing that I would say is that how we use our time in work as opposed to how we use our time out of work also can change as well. So particularly with this question, I'm really looking at what drives your time in terms of work. So what you'll see on the screen now is that there is a few things here. So there's one which is this idea of being perfect. Now, one of the things that can happen is that throughout your early years of medical school and your junior doctor years, and if you're still in them now, what you can sort of find is that there can be some real pressures on this idea of trying to put yourself under pressure to try and be perfect. This idea of making yourself feel that you've got to do, I cannot do this until I've done more research on this topic. It's a little bit, a bit like that inner critic in a way, saying, you know, I should have done more of this. I should have written and read more about that topic. So there's something about perfectionism which is not unusual within medicine, but it's because obviously when we're doing clinical-based activity where it's dealing with life, we need to have perfection. But it's not always possible because of human nature. But what I'm trying to get at with this one in terms of time, this idea of actually getting everything done, some people really struggle with this. The other one is this idea of the hurry up, you know, where actually someone asks you something and you just think, yeah, you're on the go already, I'll squeeze that into. So this idea of that, now actually, one of the things that you can often find with this is that the vocabulary that you start to use has an impact, not just on yourself, but those around you, both your loved ones and your family, but also with your working colleagues. And so one of the things that's really important to think about with the hurry up, and actually if any of you have family members, you may well find that you actually say this quite a lot. Hurry up, please, hurry up, we've got to go, we've got to get going, you know, we need to move on. And we start to have a hurry up where we're telling everyone to hurry up. People ask you how you are. No, we're not saying that we're busy, but the way that we actually say things, the tone in our voice and intonation, we're on the go. The shoulders are raised, we're squeezing it in as well. There's some really nice comments. So one of the colleagues is mentioning that that her mother calls this the perfect drying out the good, the perfect driving out the good. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm going to bring up some this idea. Other people are saying this idea of feeling that you need to be strong. The pleasing one, I wish I hadn't said yes. Now, depending on the actual work that you're doing, you may have no option other than to say yes to something because it actually needs to be done. But actually, knowing what you want to say yes to is actually a really good starting point, because actually sometimes we say yes to something without actually thinking about the implications, because we feel that the person that's asked us that we can't say no. But there are ways of doing that. And again, in terms of thinking about saying no, I'll come on to that in a bit. But and this other idea about trying hard. So I'm just going to bring something up. Some of you, thank you so much. You've already started to sort of tell me your thoughts and ideas. And I'm just going to bring up. I'm going to try and see if this poll will work. It's the last one. I just want to try and launch it. I'm launching it now. Just see if it works. It looks like it's doing it now, which is great. So I'm just having a look now. Thank you, it's working. Brilliant. Hooray. I'm really pleased. So sometimes it's easier just to have a think about it that way. Great, thank you everyone. Good. Almost everyone's there. So I'm going to now close it so that we can have a look. Great. Here we go. Here we go. So if I just close it now, perfect. I'm just going to share it with you all, because actually it's quite interesting. There's definitely two strong contenders on there. The top two. Now, what I would say about, I mean, obviously there's the other ones as well. I mean, and of course there will be more drivers for other people. But what I want to get at with the be perfect and the hurry up is one of the things that can happen with the be perfect, it also relates to your own confidence. So one of the things that can happen, particularly in some of the early years, and actually in terms of a lifelong learning aspect to clinical practice, you're always learning new things, but depending on the work that you're doing and the commitments that you have, that pressure, and it is a pressure to be really perfect, means that actually it can sometimes, we then spend more time on something than probably we needed to do, but we wanted to be absolutely sure. The other thing that around the be perfect is sometimes other people start to say, well, it's easier if I do it myself. And so one of the dangers that can come in from being perfect, trying to get it done, the hurry up, is that you can be a victim of your own success as well. And many of you may well encounter that you're often asked to do particular types of things because of your experience. So there's something really important to think about in relation to this as well. I'm just going to now move on, if I may. So let me just see here. I'm just going to hide that now. Perfect. I'm just going to move on. This is the drivers now we've done it. So I'm just going to move on to this other section here, which is looking at what we can actually learn from each of those. And one of the things that I think is really important is, I'll go through all of them, but when we're thinking about the first one of the things that we tend to do is, because we're often in the moment, we tend to forget about and value the actual work in progress that we make. So one of the things that can happen about ourselves is, because we're so keen to be perfect all the time, we forget about recognizing how much we've actually done and what progress we've already made. And actually, again, some people find this really helpful to do, is thinking like, what is actually at that point good enough? What is actually something that is exceptional? And for certain types of work, are my standards and measures at a different level from other people's? So is my, and not necessarily feeling that you should change it, but just recognizing that need to value really the progress that you make. The other one about the hurry up is, often we're so busy telling people to hurry up that we actually forget to really enjoy what we're actually doing. And one of the things that can happen with the hurry up mentality of driver is that it's not just related to time management, it relates to well-being. So one of the things that can happen is that, because we're in a cycle of hurry up, hurry up, hurry up, hurry up, you can hear it, you can hear me saying it, you can feel it, that before we know it, that we've forgotten to enjoy what we're doing. So one of the things that can also happen that's really important to think about after today around time is, have I actually become a bit more demotivated, not necessarily also because of the system structures, the staff shortages, the pressures? Is it something also about the fact that I'm so busy thinking ahead that I forgot to be in the moment, of the present moment, because I'm always thinking about what's next, what's next. I've got the pressure of a 10-minute window for a clinic. I've got to think about the next one. I'm behind schedule. Is there something about that we just need to take a step back from and just think about actually valuing the actual task that we're doing and appreciating the amazing work that you're doing? So there's something about that which is really important. On the pleasing others is deep-rooted actually, and so for some people it will have happened from childhood. So one of the things around the please approach is that we tend to please others because actually that's what we were taught to do. That's what our cultural norm was. So we were thought, please others before self. You know, so one of the things that can happen is that can be there. And so one of the things that's really important to think about is to really think about that when you decide to do that for someone else, you're taking away your valuable time to do that. And is that a good use of your time? If it isn't, but you know that you need to do it for that person, do you have to do it right now? Is it something that could be done by someone else? These are just questions to ask. Or is it actually the fact that you can't say no? Because that person you feel you have to say yes to. Now, often it can be that fact that that you have a difficulty of saying no. So one of the things to think about around saying no is that if it is something that you genuinely would like to do, but you don't have any time, then one approach that you could think about doing is to start to say that this is something that you definitely want to be able to do, but in order to be able to do that, you need to be able to free up this amount of time. And so one of the first things is understanding how much time something will take, and then being able to sort of say, is there anyone else that can help me to do that? Can I then be freed up on something? So one of the things I wanted just to share was, I was working once with a SAS doctor, and I remember vividly, absolutely brilliant educational supervisor, unbelievably brilliant. I've been doing it for years, but had got to the end of that, didn't need to be doing it anymore. He needed to be moving on for his own development, but because he was so good at it, he kept on doing the role. And so one of the things that sort of happened was that we looked at thinking about where did he want to go, like in terms of value in that next step of where he wanted to be next, what did he want to take on? And who within his own group of people that he knew, who could he see as someone that could talent spot to take on that he could spend some time with, helping and supporting, giving the confidence, helping to look at the job plan, thinking it through, to be able to succession plan in a way to release him from that, to help. Because one of the things that can happen about valuing self is that we also sometimes forget that by doing it and by saying yes, we're not giving someone else the opportunity to do it that may well want to do it if we'd asked them, if we'd spoken to them. So there's something about that valuing self which is quite deep. The other one about being strong, thank you all for sharing what you're sort of saying here. Again, please just keep the questions coming through as they are. So I'm sort of seeing here, you know, other people talking about, yeah, it's just sort of thinking about this idea of some of the hard things around time is about culture and feeling that in a way the cultural norms and behaviours of where you are creates a certain mindset around time. And that although you can look at that, it may well be harder within team or organisation to do this. But what I would say around being strong, about valuing the other people around you, is that if we don't invest in sort of thinking about how we delegate and actually how we talk to other people and how we understand, how we get feedback and think about all of those things and looking at the people around us, if we don't look at that support network, then it doesn't allow us to really think about our time, and those behaviours and mindsets are hard to break. The other one is about valuing simplicity. Sometimes we make things hard for ourselves, and one of the other key takeaways that I would definitely say to think about is make thinking easier for other people. I think that one of the things that can be really hard to do is that because we try to provide more than one option for someone, we then, if we have multiple things, then some people can't decide, then it takes longer. Sometimes just make thinking easier. Some people are just saying here is that one of the other things is that people are just talking about the fact that often they find that it's very hard to get the balance of their time. So people are just sharing that. So thank you so much. But these drivers, these are things that are quite deep rooted in ourselves. So we have to be quite practical about how we make these changes. So one of the next things that I wanted to try and look at was really thinking about this practically in 3 different ways, and sort of looking at actually the short term. So I'm going to focus on the short term now, but looking at the here and now, things that you're firefighting that are in the immediate, currently in your control, that you know that you need to address. So there'll be some short term pressures that you have around time. Then, which I'm trying to really talk about today, is this whole reflection and actually looking at how you modify your norms and behaviours around time, and actually thinking about how you actually use the day to day. And then there's a longer term one, which is harder to achieve right now today, but it gives us real food for thought. This is what people are saying, is that the people and the systems that are around us have a massive impact on really how we can use and do our time. So people are sort of saying that. So thank you, in terms of feeding back too. But I want to particularly look at this first strand here, and I'm going to bring something up on the screen now, which is a diagram. and then I'm just going to explain a little bit about it, if that's okay. So I'll just bring this up if I can now. There we go. So what you should be able to see on the screen is this kind of idea of getting things done. So just so that you can see, it starts with stuff. And so basically in our brain, like throughout the whole course of the day, we have stuff that goes in, yeah? But some of that stuff we don't need to do straight away. And one of the things that can happen with that is that we see this. So there's 3 different things that we can look at here, is that, and it looks at it on the top. So you can see from going in, I'm just moving through to the no section. It looks at eliminate, incubate, or reference. So one of the things that can happen with the multiple emails that you're CC'd into are these things that can actually, so one of the things that you can do is kind of create within, if you're using Microsoft Office or an equivalent, you have a function where you can create a way to actually put certain things going straight into a reference folder. The other thing that can happen is that if these things are not required, are they things that you can just leave alone? Because one of the dangers with email is that we feel that we've got to respond to it. Now, some of you will need to respond to email regularly, but what I do find is that most clinicians say to me that one of the difficulties that they have is that because they're not necessarily accessible and have access to technology all the time, that they have this backlog of emails. And so for some people, depending on the specialty, this will not work for everyone, but they're allocating set times to be able to do their email in the course of the day, and they create a template that sort of sends out. So that what they're able to do is kind of create something that automatically is sent out that sort of says when they'll get back to someone by. Now that doesn't work for everyone, and also if you're less than full time, working on multiple sites, you may well have more than one email that you have to access. So that it's just that in terms of using the technology to help you is sensible to do. But what you can then see underneath this is a range of other options of this, like, is it something that you need to do? Now, if it's less than 2 minutes, I'd like your thoughts on this if you're happy to. But one of the things that's interesting is that sometimes what can happen is if we see something come in, we actually read it and we know we can do it, but we then move on to the next one. And there's quite a bit of research that looks at this concept of that if you've got an allocated slot where you're doing it and it's only going to take 2 minutes, do you just do it? Now, if you then have loads of 2-minute jobs, then obviously it then's eating into your time. But there's something interesting about, we often read something, move on to the next thing, think, oh, I need to do that. But actually, if we just do it, would it work? So the other question around that one was, are you finding that you're having quite a few of these 2-minute tasks where it isn't just a 2-minute job, where you could do it, but you're not doing it because you're reading or doing other things first of all? So that's the question. Some of you don't have things that you can delegate to. Some of you will have. And I think that the other thing that's really important is to look, time management and efficiency only works when we're working with other people around it. So there's something about thinking about how we delegate and in what way. The other one is does this actually need to be done now, or can we defer it? And if we can defer it, how long can we defer it to? Is this actually something that I can move forward? Now, there is some fantastic app technology. It would be great to know what people use in terms of their synchronization for calendars and whether you use particular ones. There's loads of great things that you can do around that to allow you to have all your commitments in one place, to color code it, to have it all link in. And I think that in a way, it's really crucial that we use technology to help us to do that. So if there's particular things that people do, just let me know. What I also wanted to do is to think about actually how you look at your time. And one of the things that I think is really important is that when we think about input and output, there are particular things that we need to consider when we're looking at that. So in terms of approaches to what we have that are coming in, so we've got emails that are coming through, we've got unplanned meetings that are taking place, we've got complex projects that we're working on, we've got our clinical commitments that we're doing, but also the way that the environment that we're working in, there can be small steps that we can do to kind of change and alter the way that we work. And I think that's what someone was just sort of saying earlier, was that in a way the organization and team that they're in kind of perpetuates a kind of cycle of working quite long hours. So the environment itself is creating a culture where staying longer is becoming the norm, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that's a quality of output. So one of the things that might be quite good to do is to actually, now this is not to try and create any more work, none of this is to create more, but it might be interesting that when you're in a kind of normal day of work, whether it be late this afternoon or the days ahead, is to notice actually what you actually do in the course of the day. And you can use your note function on your phone to do this, but just to kind of log actually what's happening hour by hour over the course of any given day or particular days within the week. And are there certain times of the day where I seem to be more productive? Am I actually looking at how many times have I actually clicked on my email? Really, was it 60 times in the day? You know, on average, people look at their phone 152 times in the day. But what I'm trying to get at with this is that in order for us to be able to change our time and our relationship with time, we need to be mindful about what we actually do and how we use it. And probably the only way to really do that is to kind of review it in some way. So when I'm saying a time log, I'm not necessarily suggesting you're doing kind of minute by, but just reviewing on a particular day, just having a note about actually what you do and how you do it, because I think that can be very helpful. One of the things that a lot of people struggle to do is to actually find documentation and emails that they've got. So people tend to waste time looking for something that they could have filed in a particular way. So there's something about how our efficiencies are that are important to understand as well. And one of the things that I'd suggest around this is nothing major, but if when you're looking at the time is just to think about any particular patterns that are surfacing. And I'm going to share a few time management techniques and thoughts that you can do and tools that you can use. And then I thought I might just bring one up in particular and then share some tips before we kind of bring, just so, because what I really wanted us to try and do is just think about how we make an active change to our observation of what we do with time. How we look at ourselves and giving ourselves a check, think, okay, there are certain things that I'm doing which actually are unhealthy that I need to readdress. To try and experiment with some of the techniques that I'm going to use now, do one at a time. If you can, do one at a time for 30 days and see if it has any impact. And then if it doesn't, then or you need to adapt it, then fine. But just think about how you might engage with certain types of tools that will help you. It would be really great if people were happy to share any particular app technology that they use to help them with time, any resources that they have. If you want to write them in, I can share with other people and send that through at the end. But what I thought we'd do here is if I can just bring up a few things. I've got some notes up here, which you can see on the screen, which says urgent, important. I'm going to bring that up as an example. The idea of the must, should, want. The AM or PM, I know how to start this, I don't know how to start this. And then also the other one is things I can do myself, things I'm dependent on others to do. So I'm actually going to pick up, so in the first two on here, the urgent, important, I'm going to show you that on a grid in a moment. And I'll also explain the must, should, want on another slide too. But one of the things that's really interesting, and you will all know this already, but some of you will have particular times of the day that you're good at stuff. So you'll have certain things that you know, my energy levels are best first thing in the morning. Or do you know what, late on in the day, that is actually when I have my energy levels. That's when I definitely am able to tackle a particular type of work. So for some people, they definitely are more AM or PM. And one of the things that's really good to do is that if your energy levels are higher at that time, is thinking about when you're most productive and blocking out, if you can, and you're able to, blocking out time so that you can actually look at a more demanding task then. Because if your energy levels are higher there, your motivation is higher. So there's something important there to look at. Now, the other thing around thinking about time is often we put things off because it's quite a big project, or we need to really do it over a period of time. And sometimes it's actually just getting started and chunking out our time, allocating 30 minutes, allocating an hour. Some of you may have heard of the Pomodoro technique, which was with this idea of a timer, where you put a timer on for a certain length of time. It doesn't suit everyone, but this idea of having a timer to just get started on a project, and then you can carry on if you want to, but you then designate a certain amount of time and it goes off. But one of the things is actually, if I know how to start it, what are the bits that I know that I can do? And what bits do I not know? Where do I need to go to for help? And even just sketching that out will take minutes, but it means that you've started. And then also that you can then do is, what things can I do myself? And what things am I dependent on for others? And actually, how important is it that I prioritize the other people beyond myself because they're going to take longer? So there's something about the projects, activities, audits, and improvement projects that we're doing, where when we're looking at this, what do I know that I need first? What don't I know? Where can I go to for that? Who do I need to help? So there's something around this that's really useful to try and start to use. I'm going to bring up the urgent important grid just to show you. It's so simple. You can see it on the screen now. It's completely self-explanatory, but what I just wanted to just sort of say here is that you've got the do it soon, do it right away, you've got the avoid, ignore, or delegate and reschedule. So you've got those ones there you can have a look at too. So one of the things that I would say is in the first quadrant here, you can say urgent, important. It needs to be done as soon as you can. Then the other one is it's not urgent, but it's important, but then you need to allocate that it needs to be done, ideally, if it can be that day, but you're starting to put your work into certain quadrants so that you're able to allocate where it is. It's a very quick tool, and if you've not used it before, I'd highly recommend it. The other thing that I would just sort of say in terms of tips is that the timer one is the one that I just mentioned in terms of the Pomodoro technique. Some people love this. It's not personally for me, but I can see why it really works for a lot of people. This is what's called, it's called having two to-do lists. It's having a master list which has got everything on it. So people tend to do this on an Excel spreadsheet where they've got everything that they need to do. And then what they then do is they then take out 3 to 4 tasks that they need to accomplish that day. And it may well be a mix of things that they're doing, but they focus it in on that. So it's called having one master list where you keep a track of everything, and then you have a daily list. And you start with those few things to begin with. The must, should, want, and will approach is what must you do, what should you do, and then what do you want to do, and then what will you do. So this is basically looking at I must do this and I should do that. So it works very similarly to the urgent important grid, but then it needs to have some fun things that you really want to do and things that you really will do as a result. So the want is so crucial. So what the want to do is I've done these things that I've been putting off, but in order now that I've done it as a reward, I want this. Many of you will be able to do this already, which is this admin hour, where you devote time to doing in a particular way, but you actually allocate that regularly in the calendar if you can. The other ones are around batching. This is a really interesting technique. So some people find that by grouping similar tasks together, so you are able to put together particular projects that require the same person, or if it's based in a particular location where you're working and you're working on multiple sites, you can then batch the work accordingly. The other one that you can do is this concept which is called a crumple zone. So one of the other things that people have people really love this, but again it will really depend on how your day works. But one of the things is that you actually allocate a piece of time that's in your diary, but it's actually giving you an extra bit of time just in case there's an unexpected task. So creating an extra slot time in your week. Again, it only works if you're able to control your own diary in that way, but the crumple zone has worked really well for consultants, SaaS, and for GPs. And finally, the other one that a lot of people have mentioned in the past is that often one of the things that they've struggled with is actually the environment and location that they're in, and just simply moving to a different place or space to do it actually has an impact on their energy and their ability to do work. So there's something interesting around that. And so one of the things that I'd sort of like us to do is just to think about, with what we've had so far today and thinking about those tips, is the particular things that you feel that you would want to do. What I would say is that after this session, the webinar and the material is all there for you to review again, to look at the presentation and to go through it if you want to in more detail. But it'd be great to think about one of those particular tasks that you'd like to do and to take that forward. The other thing about this topic is that it actually can be something that is really helpful to do at a face-to-face basis, as well as doing something through e-learning as well. So I wanted to mention to you that if you want to, we have a module which is called Workload and Time Management. And in addition to that, we have other modules that link into this topic area, which are on the screen now. But the other thing that I would say to you is that if this is an area that you really feel that you want to spend time on, we have got 2 masterclasses. These are sessions that are full day in duration. They're face-to-face, where we take a particular topic on this area and then we drill down into lots of other topic areas. So we get a chance to share, talk, best practice with others. And these are the next 2 dates that we've got on this particular topic. So if it is something that you feel that you would benefit from, then if you go onto the BMA's website and go into BMA Learning and Development, into the webinar section, you'll find it. And so what I really wanted to do was to thank you so much for all your questions, for all your insight. One of the things that I'll do is, with any of the other things that have come up from other people, I can bring things through of any other things that I can send. So I'll make sure that I do that now. We're now coming towards the end of the session. Thank you so much for your time. And the sessions on webinars take place on a monthly basis. So we have every month usually a particular topic that comes up which can be of interest. So thank you all so much. I will leave you for now. So I'll start to click off on my, you'll no longer see my webcam, my voice